Hello friends, Heidi here from Rain Country. God is good all the time. And today I'm going to talk about the best ways to garden, especially on a budget. Now, this is going to be my garden update for this week because, well, it's pouring down rain right now. The spring rains have finally come and it's been great because our garden needs it. In our area, we are meant to get lots and lots of rain this time of year. We need to top off our rainwater tanks, and which I'm sure they're topped off by now with the amount of rain that's coming down out there and has been coming down, and need to get our ground good and saturated, especially with the stuff that's recently gone in there. I've got my peas planted. I've got, or at least my first planting of peas is in. I've got my potatoes in the ground. I've got calendula in the ground, nasturtiums. I plan to put more nasturtiums out there still, but we got the new fruit trees put out front, and so yes, all this stuff needs a good watering. Now I do have stuff that I've started in the greenhouse. You may have seen my last video, but I did start some more things. Like I got 4 different types of squash plants started in pots. My zucchini I'm going to wait and direct seed. I've also got 2 different melons and 2 different cucumbers started in there. They're not germinated yet. They're not showing any signs, but they will soon. So that's where I like to do that. And eventually I'll do an update video showing you all that, but there's nothing to see right now but dirt in pots as far as that goes. Oh, and I also transplanted a lot of my tomato plants directly in the ground, and I think you might have seen that in my previous video, and they're doing pretty good. Okay, so what I want to talk about is what is the best way to garden. We hear all the time about the best way to garden. For some people, that's going to be the back to Eden method. And then we've got permaculture, companion planting, food foresting, hugelculture. I don't think I'm saying that right, but you know what I mean. And every day I seem to hear a new name of a new garden method, and it's supposed to be the absolute best way to do it. But the truth is, while each method may work really great for some people, it doesn't mean it's the all-around best method for everyone. Back to Eden, for instance, is not necessarily the best method for everyone. Even for us, even though we only live about 75 miles away from Paul Gauci, the one who started the whole Back to Eden method. And I'm not saying that wouldn't work for us. I think it would work great here. But the other reason why it may not work for some people is if you're on a budget and you don't have a good source to get wood chips. Even though we live in a logging community, we don't have a good source for wood chips other than having to buy them. And then when we do see them, somebody usually grabs them up. You know, if they're free, somebody usually grabs them up before we can get to them. And so I don't like to depend on something like that. And so that could be part of the problem too. Now, I know other people who've tried Back to Eden, quite a few out there, and it just did not work for them. Now, here's another issue. Where Paul Gauci is located, he's kind of in this area on the peninsula of Washington that gets the least amount of rain. Where we're at, we get the most amount of rain. And the thing about slugs is they really like it here. And they like to really hide in wood, and so wood chips are going to be more likely to draw slugs and cause more issues. So that can be more of a problem for us here. Though I do still use them when I can get a hold of them. I'll even take wood shavings out of Patrick's shop, the good ones, the ones that you know are going to break down, not the cedar, because cedar doesn't break down and it can actually kill your plants. But I do that for more of a fertilizer, not so much of a ground covering. So the things you have to consider for your area is going to be what is available to you, what is your climate like, and I'm not just talking about zones. A lot of people get caught up in zones, and zones only have to do with the hardiness. So if you have a plant that's hardy up to a certain zone, which means maybe this zone doesn't get super cold winters or really hot summers. That's what that has to do with. Zones have nothing at all to do with your climate. And to me, yes, though, you want to make sure you get a plant that can handle your zone. what I find even more important is making sure, or at least as important, that it can handle your climate. Now, it doesn't mean don't at least try. I don't always just go by zones and climates either when I'm looking at plants. I'm like, I'm going to try it and see if it works. I really didn't think marshmallow would actually grow well here initially, but I thought I'm going to try it anyway because I really wanted to grow marshmallow. Well, guess what? It might have taken me a few years to finally get some good plants going, but they are established. I have marshmallow coming out my ears now. And so even if you think it's not going to grow in your area, you may be surprised to find out some things will. Like I didn't think grapes, for instance, would grow well here, but the right kind of grapes can do great. So you have to also look when you're shopping for plants for your area. Look at the ones, like one really good place to at least go to and look this up is to go to Rain Tree Nursery online and find the map. There's a map in there that will show you what types, what varieties of different fruits will grow in your area. One variety might not do good, another variety will. So look into all these different things when you're looking at your area. So what we have to look at is we don't have the shortest growing season as some people do, but it is not very long in the sense that other places in Washington have a much longer growing season because they have warmer, hotter, longer seasons than we do, where we just have wet and cold quite a bit of the time. With a short, we do have a summer that can actually be 3 months long, not always, but it can be. And so we can get some stuff to grow pretty good, but if it's one of those summers where it's kind of wet all summer long, we've had those too, then we have other things to consider like battling slugs. And slugs are our biggest pest here. It's going to be difficult unless you live in this area and you try to grow things in this area to understand, one, the level of slugs that we have. It's not that they're enormous slugs, we get those too, but it's the absolute number of slugs that we can get in our area, and the fact that we get near constant rainfall, that a lot of the solutions that people have, beer in containers, diatomaceous earth, coffee grounds, eggshells, even eggshells. I've seen slugs climb right over eggshells to get what they want here. That's how hardy they are. And a lot of these things, sometimes they help, even copper. I don't care what it is, most likely it's not going to work. Now, ducks, if you have the space and ducks are something you want, ducks are a good idea. I understand that. They eat slugs more than anything. However, you can also train your chickens to eat slugs, especially the baby slugs. My chickens love them. They will eat them up. And ever since we got chickens, our slug population went way, way, way downhill. And they have been the #1 best way to get slugs. Other than that, the way I was doing it before we got our chickens was going out bright and early in the morning, just as the sun was starting to come up, where it was just light enough where I could see, and start picking slugs off the plants. And I would literally pick up to 200 slugs out of my garden every morning. And that was the only and best way I could keep up on them. There is another method that I use in a very limited amount, and that is Sluggo has approved for organic gardening. I still am a little bit leery about it, even reading the ingredients, and how it works. It's supposed to be all natural and all that stuff, but I only use that where I absolutely have to. But part of that too is because it's expensive, and so I try not to use that. I try to focus on things that are free and I know for sure are natural. But you can look into Sluggo if you have it's the little pellets. It's mostly the iron in it, the natural iron in it, that kills the slugs. And then whatever is used for the bait, I'm not sure about, but it's supposed to be approved for organic gardening. Of course, if you're talking about FDA and all that, USDA, I don't really, trust their standards. But sometimes you have to do what you got to do. Now, again, coffee grounds are helpful. Sprinkling coffee grounds around the particular plants that slugs really like, and eggshells, these things do help. However, when you live in an area, like diatomaceous earth is not helpful, because as soon as it rains, as soon as it gets wet, it's useless. So you can't water your plants with it on there. And if it rains, it's useless. So it just doesn't work. But the diatomaceous earth can also be good for your garden, so it's not a bad idea. Salt is also one way we can get rid of them, but again, you don't want it too close to your plants or it's going to kill the roots. And you know, you can sprinkle it in the pathways where you think the slugs are going to go, but again, when you live in rain country, the rain comes, washes away all the salt, and you know, it only works on dry days. And the thing is here, the dry days, the slugs don't really come out. They only come out when it's wet. So anyway, you just have to keep hunting and searching and find what works for you. And if the beer in the dish and copper wire and all that works great for you, or if you've never heard of those and you don't live in such a wet climate, try them. They might work really great for you. They just don't work here. Okay, so moving on to fertilizers. Now, mostly what I'm going to be talking about here is what I do for our garden. Now, for fertilizers, I go for anything that is free. I very rarely ever buy fertilizers. The only one that I buy on occasion, maybe once every other year or so, is a big bag of blood meal. I'll link to that below. It's organic. The blueberries and other types of berries, especially the ones in the pots, are the ones that really like that. And because they're in pots, those are the ones I'm more particular about, making sure they get some extra nutrients in them to keep them going. I've had them in pots for, I think it's been 6 years, and they're doing great. And I do have a video just on taking care of blueberries in pots, and I'll go ahead and link to that right up here if you're interested. I think I did that one last year. One of the big things, as you may already know, that we do at least once a year is we'll get several loads. We have some neighbors down the road that have horses. They are happy for us to come get the horse manure. And so Pat goes down there, he gets a big scoop, he'll make several trips down there, like one year 12 trips of bucket loads of I think it is, what is it? I don't know I can't remember how much is in one bucket load of horse manure, and we'll spread it everywhere. We just put it everywhere. Now, the bad thing about that, when you're talking about a fresh horse manure like that hasn't been really well composted, is you're going to be looking at bringing in other plants into your garden, such as, you know, grass. Around here it's going to be morning glory, creeping buttercup, dock, which is a great plant, but we get a lot of it that wants to come up in the garden, and it quickly grows very long and tough tap roots. And so as soon as you see it coming up, you got to dig it up. You got to dig it up right away, otherwise it's almost impossible to get out. The wild geranium, which is a great, beautiful medicinal plant, it will self-seed all over the place, and so at least it pulls up easily. That's one thing I like about that, unlike the dock and the creeping buttercup and the morning glory. Ugh. So these are things you have to watch out for when you're bringing in manure from places like that, where you're not buying it in the store, where it's had all this stuff, all this stuff supposedly removed from it. You're just more likely to get a little bunch of plants that you may not want growing in your garden, so keep in mind that. We do it because it's free, and we do our best to just keep up on the weeds and stuff that want to come in with it. Other great methods you can use are the chop and drop method. One thing, let's see, I don't know if I have it. Well, I have comfrey right here. Comfrey is a really great thing to grow. It's a wonderful medicinal herb, has a lot of great properties, but it's also excellent for your garden. Now, I like to plant the comfrey at the base of my fruit trees because the roots will carry nutrients down to the roots of the fruit trees, and it's really, really good for them. Plus, it's a great chop and drop. It can take over. You have to be careful with it because of that. However, I don't really mind. You just chop it down, throw it back down on top of the soil. It becomes a great green mulch, as does borage and even dandelion leaves. Though I just like to harvest my dandelion leaves. But borage can go crazy. You can get tons and tons of borage. If you get too much, it's easy to pull up and then chop it up and throw it right back down on top of your soil. It makes a nice layer and a great mulch and fertilizer for your garden. So comfrey and borage are two that I really recommend for that, and that's what I do. But you can also do that with your plantain and other things that if they start growing and you're just having a hard time keeping up on them, well, just keep chopping them down, throwing the leaves down, and then let them just break down. And here's another thing that I also found as far as slugs go, is you can take some of that stuff and, like, if you, let's say you pull up a weed and lay it somewhere, something that, like slugs do like, they'll eat dandelions if they've been pulled up. They, you know, the leaves, they'll go after them for some reason. Once they become weak, that's when they, and I'm guessing that's because the phytates or whatever it is, that when the plant is alive and healthy, it helps fight off, naturally it will fight off pests. But once it's dying and ill, then the pests will attack it. You know, that's one good way to tell if a plant is healthy or not. If it's getting really eaten up by bugs, then most likely it's not super healthy and it needs more nutrients. But anyway, you can lay that down in certain pathways. The slugs will be drawn to those things, and then you can just gather them all up and get rid of them, or whatever, smash them, or however you want to do it. For me, when I find slugs, they get fed to my chickens. And this is the reason I said, like I said in another video, we're getting a fence that's supposed to come in today or tomorrow to go around our front yard area so I can close certain areas in to keep the chickens safe, and also let them kind of get in there and get all the little baby slugs and eggs that are in there, and see a reduction in population of slugs in the front area, just like we have in the back. Now, most people are going to know that you can compost a lot of your foods from your, you know, your leftover scraps and stuff, obviously. Now, we don't have a compost pile. We have yet to find out a good place to start a compost bin, because we keep adding on and doing different things around here. So what we've done for the past several years is all throughout the year, especially during the months when nothing is growing, we just throw stuff right out in the garden. Whether it be apple scraps, banana scraps, what I haven't already, you know, after I've made the vinegar out of the apple scraps, then I take those and throw them out in the garden, let them break down and fertilize the garden. Banana peels always get tossed out there. Sometimes I'll specifically lay them in certain pots, you know, with the blueberries, or they just get tossed out in the main garden. They're great because they break down quickly. The peels are the highest in the minerals, and so they will put minerals back into your soil. In the fall, I'll get leaves from the neighbors and lay those over my garden. That makes a good ground cover to protect it during the winter, and then also break down and fertilize the garden. Grass clippings through the spring and summer, whenever we're mowing, grass clippings go on the garden, especially on top of the potatoes and any of the berries and grapes. They love these things, and they also protect the soil and add nitrogen into it. And if you can get good grass clippings, if you know neighbors that have grass clippings and they don't spray their grass with any kind of Roundup or anything like that, gather those up and put them on there too. That's what I do. I only take them from the neighbors that I know don't spray their yards. And don't forget those coffee grounds. Coffee grounds can go just about anywhere, especially on your berry plants. Most of your berries are going to really like the coffee grounds. And like I said, they are also helpful in keeping slugs out. Oh, and then one more thing I forgot to write down on my list. This is why I have a list, because I always forget things, but I just remembered, is the ashes from your wood stove. If you have a wood burning stove, take those ashes and sprinkle them around on their garden. This is an excellent way to add a lot more minerals into your garden, so that you know, you can get more minerals into the vegetables that you harvest from it. So all over your garden areas. I put them in the pots, you know, with the berries. I put them in the main garden. I put them in the greenhouse. I put them out front. I put them wherever, because I want minerals in my food. We always hear about how the produce in the stores is depleted in minerals. Well, one way to add that in there is put them ashes from your wood stove in there. Okay, now let's talk a little bit about pest control. So natural ways for pest control can be companion planting. So I do a lot of that, partly because I think it's just beautiful, but also because these companion plants, these certain plants like marigolds, catnip, feverfew, mints. I know, yes, I know mints can take over. I've been growing them for years, but you can keep up on it. It might take a little bit of work, but you can keep up on the mints and keep them from taking over. So I've now got it so that I have mints growing. In fact, I'll put a picture right here what it looks like right now. My mojito mint is coming up along the outside edge of the garden the way I want it to, and that helps keep pests from going into the garden. We grow peppermint around the apple tree because ants like to get up in our apple tree and put the aphids up in there, but since I started planting peppermint and growing it around the base of my apple tree, we've had no problems with ants. Ants hate mints, and a lot of pests really do not like feverfew, but a lot of your beneficial insects like your bees and your butterflies love the feverfew. They're attracted to the yellow centers, and so I think it's a great plant to have at least a couple of them in their garden. They will self-seed and try to come up everywhere, but they pull up easy enough as long as you get them when they're young, and then you can, you know, just keep a couple of them in there. They're perennials, they'll just keep coming back, and it's a good medicinal plant to grow, very great for aches and pains and inflammation, and also for stomach disorders. It's a bitter, so it's going to help. It tastes terrible, but it's really going to help with stomach problems. So I recommend feverfew, and then catnip as well. As I said, catnip's especially good for keeping away mosquitoes. Nasturtium is another one. It's really good for keeping away white flies, and also slugs will be drawn to the nasturtiums, and since nasturtiums kind of go crazy anyway, I don't worry about it so much if the slugs eat some of them, because I have plenty to spare, and it keeps the slugs more apt from going to your other plants, because they're going to go to the nasturtiums. And then marigolds, of course, are a good one. I always have a problem getting marigolds to grow well. One year I did, but I don't know what the deal is with marigolds, but I have all my other plants and I'm really happy with that. So look into your various plants. Garlic is also really good at repelling a lot of insects. So I grow garlic here and there throughout my garden. I just try to keep it from growing next to my beans and my peas, because supposedly they're not supposed to do well together. Though one year I had onions and beans growing in the same pot, and they both did beautifully. Both of them did. They did great. So it just really depends. So you can't always just go by some hard and set rules. Sometimes just keep experimenting, even if it's against the rules. Experiment and see if it works for you. Just like I did that one year. It's like, I'm going to put these onions and these beans in the same pot and see what happens. And they did great. So you never know. Okay, so the thing is I'm not a master gardener. I don't have any kind of degree or special whatever, some kind of certificate or anything that says whatever. I just started messing around with stuff and experimenting right from day one. Sometimes that is going to be, in fact, I think in almost all cases, you're going to find just doing it, experimenting, even if it's a failure, it's not a failure in the fact that now you have an education. You learned something. The hands-on real life stuff is the best way to get an education in gardening. And if you're into preparedness and you're thinking about someday you're putting away seeds so that when times get bad you'll start gardening, what I say is don't put it off. You're going to need to learn these things, because it doesn't matter what book you have, how many videos, how many of Danny and Wanda's videos you've watched, how many of my videos you've watched, or how many of whoever's videos you've watched. It's what we do is not necessarily going to work for you. You need to find out by just doing it. And even what works for the neighbor down the road may not work for you. You have to do it to find out what is best. So a lot of these things, they don't have to cost a bunch of money. You don't have to run to the store and buy a bunch of special fertilizers and special equipment. Just find what works. See what you can get for free. You know, such as the horse manure, the grass clippings, or growing things that you can use for yourself, but you can also, that grow prolifically, like the comfrey and the borage, you can chop and drop and use as a fertilizer. And doing the companion planting, growing medicinal herbs like the catnip and the feverfew and the nasturtiums, that also double or triple as a pest repellent. Before I finish, I want to remember, I almost forgot, I was going to say, as far as a good pest spray, last year I did another experiment using only herbs from my garden. I created my own pest spray for putting on my young plants, you know, especially those in the greenhouse that tend to get attacked by certain, I don't know what, there's something that gets in there, and certain plants like peppers and stuff, it'll eat them clear to the ground. So I gathered up a bunch of herbs from my own garden, and I have a recipe on that I'll link to right here, and I found out it works really good. So I just spray that right on the plants. It's totally organic, and as they're growing, you know, especially when they're young, that's when the bugs like to eat them straight down, and then I just keep spraying that on there, and that keeps them away. It gives the plants time to get established and grow to a point where the bugs will leave them alone. And so you can look at that. It's totally free, you know, just made from things I already grow. Okay, so just to say it one more time, don't just assume that because something works best for someone else, that it's the only method, or because they say it's the best way to do it, it doesn't mean it's the only method. You have to keep finding what works best for you, and don't feel like a failure if you tried these methods and they didn't work. There's so many different things that come into play, and so they're just like a lot of things I say, there's no one size fits all. So the best way to do it is to just do it and keep working with it. Take some of these suggestions. If they don't work for you, don't use them. Try something else. Get creative and experiment. Okay, well, I hope you enjoyed this video and that it sort of helps get you going and make you realize that you don't have to spend a lot of money to have a good, healthy garden. Thanks for watching. Take care and God bless.